Welcome back to Enthador, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Marcus Aurelius, and this is Dwarf Fortress, version 0.43, and we are the town of Foresthome, and we just had a huge migration wave. It is the first day of the 4th month of the 158th year of the world of Enthador, though technically history took place many centuries before written time even began. This episode is going to be all about walls, ladies and gentlemen, because at no time in the history of our world, save for perhaps 2nd century BC China, walls are quite the topic of conversation. And the town of Foresthome in the world of Enthador is no different. And we have built a magnificent wall, and I'm going to give you a little bit of a tutorial on what I think makes an effective wall. But before we do that, we are going to profile a dwarf. "172. That's one of our new dwarves. That's Henrik, and I will introduce you to all of our new dwarves after we complete this dwarf profile. So let's find Henrik, shall we? Henrik Dakostkor is currently unassigned and is storing an object in a stockpile. Henrik's last name means floor cavern, and Henrik is the wife of Beard Barber, the eldest, or the mother of Richmond, who is actually a dwarf at Sandpillar. I don't think Richmond is here in Foresthome. And also the mother of Mebzuth, who looks like did come to Foresthome with his mother. That's cool. Also the older sister of Tellor, one of our Sandpillar dwarves, along with the niece of Black Iron Tarkus, Brolock Alemaster, Stagar the Goat, Ingelram Eisenzahn, and that looks like it, but what's cool here is we have a named dwarf, not one of our dwarves, but a named dwarf nonetheless, Osranusdmdas. And okay, so she is the aunt of Dmitri Halfbear, and cousins with Mr. Popdog, John Dead, Azrael, Callum, Olek Stormbeard, and that looks like about it. She worships 2 different gods, Doran and Lengud, and is on friendly terms with a lot of the people that she migrated to Foresthome with. So there we go. Her thought is, oh, where is Sodel Lancer Twinkles? I cannot give in to sadness. Sodel Lancer Twinkles. She felt pleasure recently near a fine seat. She was grouchy when caught in the rain. She was aroused talking with her spouse. Yow. She was disgusted while forced to drink vomit. Wait, what? While forced to drink vomit? She was annoyed after drinking water without a well. Okay, so that's a lot of problems there. We don't have booze, or we didn't at this time when she was drinking water out of the well, and I guess there might have been vomit in the water too, so she had to drink vomit. Wow, that's not a good day. Not a good day for Henrik. She was horrified after seeing Ati Palace Blushes die. Oh yes, I didn't want this to be the way that you found out about that. I wanted to break it to you a bit more softly. I didn't know dwarves could do that. But basically, poor Ati, who was the girlfriend of our mayor, Old Skunky, she got stuck under a bridge and died of thirst. It was my mistake, honestly. I didn't know she was down there. I thought everything was cool. I was testing out our bridges, and unfortunately, you can't hear the dwarves screaming, "Hey, let me out, let me out!" You know, that doesn't happen, although that should be something they put in Sound Sense. But unfortunately, so Addie died of thirst, and her corpse is currently bloating in the sun because we don't have a crypt or anything like that. I did, however, create a memorial for her, which I will show you in just a moment, which I put in Old Skunky's dining room. Okay, she was annoyed at lack of chairs. That makes sense. She's 47 years old. Henrik likes native gold, aluminum, yellow spessartine, cotton paper, hatch covers, mules for their stubbornness, giant raccoons for their cunning, the words of the Oracle of Lutes, and the sound of the musical intricacy. When possible, she prefers to consume echidna, tapir cheese, beetroot wine, and honeybee royal jelly. She absolutely detests cave spiders, and she has a great feel for social relationships and a great memory. Well, that's great. All right, so yeah. All right, guys, let's talk about the tragedy here. So we had poor Addie die, and let's take a look at Addie's memorial here in the mayor's dining room. This is an exceptional diorite memorial to Addie Kostlathumr. The slab reads, "In memory of Addie, born 73, died of thirst in the year 157. Such a tragedy." And we actually have another tragedy kind of on the way. I'll get to that in just a moment, but first of all, I want to introduce all of the migrants who came from Sandpillar. And we have Bearcat, son of Zephon. We have Chief Jaronka. We have Dweezil, Ender Ling, Ennaura, Gavin, Kabuis, and Riok. Now the problem with this is, and I've never seen anything like this before, but Kabuis is our only trained military dwarf, but for some reason Kabuis arrived at Foresthome in a melancholy. And what melancholy means basically is that they've given up on life, and they're going to walk around and strip off their clothes and just let themselves die by being exposed to the elements and not having access to food or water. And there's nothing I can do about this. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense that Kabuis would decide to migrate all the way from Sandpillar to Foresthome while in a melancholy. You'd think he would just stay in his melancholy in Sandpillar, but for some reason he migrated in, and he will unfortunately soon be dying, and we'll have to make another memorial slab. I want to put our crypt inside the pyramid that I will eventually build, so that's why I'm just letting the bodies, like there's Addie there, just kind of rot in the sun for the time being. We're nowhere near any necromancers, so we don't have to worry about that. But that's that. Unfortunately, bad things occurring already in Foresthome. But let's talk about the new dwarves that are not from Sandpillar. So we have Urist McFacepalm, Fodden Meinhardt, Mistamage, Prospero, Nathan Jessup, Skydea Dwarfhammer, Wolf Henrik, Porcipina, who is a bone queen. I put that as the profession because it wouldn't fit in the name. Beard Barber, and Callan Oakenshield, or Orkinshield. So welcome all y'all to Foresthome. I hope you have a lovely time and don't die of exposure. Hey, you can't have it all. So this is our starting farm here. The cool thing about surface farms, and this makes absolutely no sense in the real world, but it somehow works in the dwarven world, is that any surface crop that can grow in your biome can be grown any season. So you can grow a crop spring, summer, autumn, winter. So it allows you a lot of freedom, and there's tons of things to choose from, obviously, but what I'm focusing on myself is on the plants that grow natively in this region anyway. So I'm having my dwarves run around and harvest the plants that are around and use those seeds in order to do a actual farm. Because if you just make a farm plot of seeds you buy from the traders, that's fine. That's totally cool, but we're not going to have enough seeds for it to last. So I'm focusing on the stuff I can get the most bang from my buck with. But anyways, what's funny about this is dwarven underground plants. Now, underground, bear in mind, there's no sun, right? There's no morning, there's no evening, there's no summer, there's no winter. Every day is the same. And yet, most underground plants only grow in a particular season, even though, again, those seasons don't exist underground. And yet, above ground, it's perfectly okay to grow something 4 seasons a year. It doesn't matter. So it feels like it should be the opposite. But hey, it's how the cookie crumbles. So let's take a look here at what we got. So we have some barley, I guess, but that sucks because we don't have seeds for that. I don't know how I let that happen. Let's change that to, I guess, finger mill it. Or I guess we could find some more barley seeds. Maybe barley we brought with us, and that's why we have it. But we'll do finger millet instead. And then this one we have fisher berries all year round. This one we have garden cress. This one we have prickleberries. And this one we have raspberries. So these dwarves are just going to have a shit ton of berries. Berries everywhere. And of course, as I get a bit more safe and as more things get built and I have more free time to focus on farming, we're going to greatly expand this. So we're going to be growing all manner. That's the one cool thing about being on the surface, is there's so many things you can grow on the surface, whereas there's only like 6 things you can grow underground. So it really, really makes the farming aspect of the game come alive. So there's Caboose. You can see him. He's not a happy camper. So here's a look at our layout. So we have a singular wall around the center part of town. And that wall has 3 gates. And currently, I'm pretty sure all 3 gates are tied to the same lever. And that's this one. I think this lever here actually isn't tied to anything. Hope I'm right about that. No, not hotkeys. Was it notes? I haven't even placed a note. Yeah, it's very poor of me. I haven't been very smart lately. Let's place a note here. And let's call it gates, because it's all of them. Although, I've been thinking about maybe splitting it up, but I just figure it takes a dwarf a little bit of time to go from one lever to another. So let's say we caught a werebeast or something past the first gate, but he hasn't quite got to the second one. I'd rather have them both shut automatically than have a split-second wait between them. That's kind of how I looked at it. And I also have a dog here, in a pasture, just to make sure if something sneaks in. But I did something, I don't know if this is going to work, but I thought that it might. Sometimes your furniture can spot enemies, so I put a statue in all the cardinal directions. North, and somewhere around here to the west is a statue. There, west, okay. And there's a ton of giant dingoes, by the way, like a whole pack of them. And over here to the east is a statue. And then finally, down to the south. So I'm hoping that if a werebeast or something sneaky does show up, that those statues will in some way reveal them. If not, of course, we always have the dog. And I'm not going to test the gates right now because we'll kill another dwarf probably. This poor fellow here, who is Toril Abir. So we don't want to kill Toril, so we're going to not test it. But I'm pretty sure that's how it works. Now, this is not intended to be a moat, honestly. It was a lake that I had to plow through, and I've tried to expand it to such a degree that the water evaporates, and hopefully it will. I think the northern half of the map is in a temperate biome, and so it will freeze in the winter. So if worst case scenario, I can go in there and dig out the ice. But I prefer ditches to moats because enemies can swim in moats, but a ditch operates as a formidable blockage unless they're able to climb. But let's talk about the wall, right? Because I introduced this video by saying that we were going to talk about the wall, and we haven't really talked about the wall. So the wall is, of course, symmetrical. You can count. It's a good time. And here's how I made it. And I'm going to give you a little tutorial right now on making walls because I thought this one was pretty good in this respect. So one way you can make a multi-story wall is to make a single wall and then put like a staircase somewhere. And then on that next level, where you're at the top of the wall, you can build a floor on the inside of the wall and then use that floor to stand on to create the next level of the wall. And while that's how I have normally done it, that might be how I did it in Anvil Quested, it doesn't make a lot of sense from a physics perspective because you have this floor that's jutting out that's not balanced on anything, nothing's holding it up, and you're using it to build a wall. It just doesn't make a ton of sense. So what I did this time, and I thought was pretty clever, is I built a double wall. I built 2 layers of wall. And so, just so you know, it takes the same amount of blocks to build a floor as it does to build a wall. So it used the exact same amount of stone as if I had done the first method, as if I had built a floor. But the problem with the floor is if you want to get rid of it, it takes a lot of danger because you have to only get rid of 1 floor tile at a time, because remember now it's only 1Z wide. So the dwarf has to kind of stand next to it and take it down, and once it's gone, a dwarf can't walk over it. So you start off with the one in the middle, let's say, and then you can do the 2 on either side, but you can't do like 10 at a time because you might get a dwarf trapped or a dwarf might fall. But my way of doing 2 walls in a row, it allowed them to dismantle the wall easily. I can have 10 dwarves focusing on dismantling at the same time because they're dismantling it from ground floor. But before I dismantled it, I used the top of the second wall to build up the next level of the first wall. And then it got even easier after that because I built the fortifications actually outside the wall. So they weren't on top of the wall, they were 1Z outside of it. And you might think, well, that doesn't make much sense from a physics perspective. And you're right, it doesn't. But I figure no dwarf is standing on them. They're just like fortifications. So the way I'm envisioning it is they're just kind of leaning outwards. I'm sure there's some historical castle somewhere that did something like that. The only challenge about this kind of setup is that the corners are impossible to be built by themselves. You need to have it connected to the other wall by the sides or by the top or bottom. So in order to make the corners, what you need to do is I built a floor here and here out of wood. And then the dwarves stood on that floor to build the corner once this was built. So the corner attached nicely to this, and then you dismantle the floor. As you can see here, here's the wood from the dismantling, and then you build another fortification. So that's how you get a perfect square here. So now the entire town, or at least the center part of it, is surrounded by a wall, a 2 Z-level high wall, and then an outside overhang of fortifications. And another reason why that is really useful is because climbing enemies cannot climb up this, because they might climb up the wall, but then they hit the fortification. It's hard to envision looking at it top down, but this is the wall. So they're here when they're climbing up it, or I should say here, right? They come here and they climb up the wall, but then, oh, come on. But then their head, boom, bumps into the fortification. So that's how that works. So we're very secure from anything now, except for something that's fast enough and sneaks up on us and is able to get in before we can raise the drawbridges, which is sincerely possible. Werebeasts are pretty fast little buggers. So that's our situation. We have a bunch of new dwarves. Looks like 13 of them are idle. I can't imagine why. They're all set as unassigned, and we have plenty of wood, what needs moving around. So the next step, ladies and gentlemen, in our fortress, now that our defenses are secure, is to build the crafts district, which is going to be around here, around the stairs that lead down to where the stone's coming out. So we're going to build a couple buildings around here, and on the ground floor will be the workshop, and on the top floor will be the bedroom. I will have one for a mason. In fact, I'll make 2 for masons, and I'll make 1 also for our carpenter, which is now Chief Jaranka. He's taking over carpentry duties because he is a legendary carpenter. With regards to crafts dwarfs, it's a bit different because a crafts dwarf's workshop has many uses. You don't just have a crafts dwarf workshop for stone, one for wood. They all kind of get used together. Primarily what I use them for is stone crafting. So I will put the crafts dwarf's workshop on the bottom floor of the stonecrafter's house. But we're also going to need to engrave slabs, engrave memorial slabs. So that takes place also at a crafts dwarf's workshop. So occasionally, one of our engravers is going to have to step into the shop that is owned by whoever our stonecrafter is and utilize their workshop in order to chisel out a memorial on a slab. And that's just how it goes. Now we have a bunch of new animals too, some of which have names, so we cannot butcher them. But I think I've butchered everything that is butcherable, except for our turkeys, of course, who are important. I just have workshops kind of willy-nilly. Once things get cleaned up, I'll deal with that. This stockpile right here is pretty much for everything. My next step is going to be building our grand pyramid. And I think this is about good for the size of it, because remember now, it's going to be multiple stories. So pretty soon we're going to have way more space than we know what to do with. But the pyramid is going to encompass many things. It's going to be our crypt, which might be underground. I'm not sure yet. I mean, humans do put graves underground, so it wouldn't be untoward for that to be something underground. It's also going to be our Hall of History. Now, unlike in the past where I made a Hall of History out of stone pillars, which I had our dwarves engrave on, that won't be possible above ground. So our Hall of History in this sense is going to be a statue representing each year. And I will personally pick something that I think speaks for that year. So for example, the first statue I'm going to put up will probably be related to the founding of Foresthome. And then the next one, if there's a particularly interesting event, like an attack, or we kill a beast, or somebody dies, or whatever. But, you know, so I'll choose kind of an event that symbolizes that year and do a statue. The pyramid will also house the temples to all of the dwarven gods of the Oaken Flags. They'll each have their own room, their own temple. And finally, at the top of the pyramid will be the home of our noble, who will start off as a baron or baroness and will eventually rise up. And that's going to be difficult because you can really increase the value of a room by engraving the walls and floors, which you cannot do for a built area. So we're going to have some really expensive furniture. And right now all we really have is silver. So we're going to have to figure something out. Maybe we'll import some gold. I'm not quite sure what to do yet. I haven't really gotten started with our metal industry. But there is one thing I do want to do before the episode is over, and that is we need some form of military. You can see Caboose here, unfortunately, is all red because he is in melancholy. Our dwarves that came in, even the ones from Sandpillar, did not have much in the way of skills except for Inoue Rao, who is a legendary miner, so I let him take over mining duties, and Chief Duranka, who is a legendary carpenter, so is now our main carpenter, taking over for Nizek, who is now going to focus on wood crafting and wood cutting. But we did get Mr. Mage is an animal trainer, so I let him kind of keep that. And that's really it. But in terms of military, our best military, of course, is Caboose, but he's not going to be helpful to us. And Inoue Rao has good strength skills, but I'd rather have him focus on mining. The rest, you know, nobody's really that great. And I especially need a Marks Dwarf. So right now, Proserpina, or Poser, I don't know why I keep saying Proserpina. It's Proserpina, the Bone Queen, is our best Marks Dwarf at competent. So she is going to be our first recruit into our military, and she will be our militia captain. So, and I'm going to leave, normally for military dwarves, I make their name their title, but I kind of like the idea of Bone Queen. So the Bone Queen is going to be our chief militia dwarf, and we're going to get her practicing with wooden bolts as soon as we possibly can, so that at least we have something that can shoot enemies if the need arises. And I'm sure we'll get another migrant wave soon, and whoever has good melee skills, I will make them our first melee dwarf as well. Right now, Gavin is a competent mace dwarf, so we could theoretically make Gavin in the military right now. As I mentioned, Inoue Rao I'm going to focus them on mining, because legendary miner. Considering we don't have that much in the way of mining right now, and we're trying to mine in order to get resources, not to clear out spaces, the better you are at mining, the more likely it is that you will drop an ore or a stone when you mine out a tile. So it makes sense in this instance to have the best miner do it. Normally you'd want the crappiest miner because you have too much stone to work with, but in this case we're only digging because we need stone. So it's a different situation entirely. And that's that, ladies and gentlemen. So, sorry, not a lot of action this episode, but I wanted to introduce you to our new dwarves. I want to talk about the tragedies that have befallen us. And of course, I wanted to show you our magnificent wall. Our magnificent 3-story high wall, which doesn't look like much in top-down, but one of these days when we actually have some more buildings, we'll show it in 3D, and I'm sure it will look quite impressive. So that's that. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Marcus Aurelius. I'd like to thank you very much for joining me in the world of Enthador and the town of Foresthome. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.